This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Hey team, we have a new sponsor here at the Crypto Conversation, BitGet, one of the world's leading copy trading cryptocurrency exchanges. Yes, indeed. What happens if you've got the funds to invest, but you don't have the time to keep track of the market? You still want to make smart money moves. What do you do? Well, copy trading is a popular choice for beginner traders. You can shorten your learning curve by uncovering tips and strategies from more experienced traders. BitGet's copy trading platform has over 80,000 elite traders to choose from and 380,000 followers just like yourself who are already using the BitGet copy trading platform as a potential passive income stream. All it takes is one click. You can subscribe to an elite, profitable strategist, set your limits, automate your orders, and monitor their trades. I've got some links in the show notes below. One link will take you through to the BitGet sign-up page, give you a VIP discount. So learn all about it for yourself thanks to BitGet. And now it is on with the show. Hey folks, Andy here, and yes, firstly, thanks to BitGet for sponsoring the show. As I mentioned, that VIP link to sign up to BitGet is in the show notes, and if you use that link, you can sign up and trade to get a $50 bonus. Yes, indeed, $50 bonus in USDT. So, what are you waiting for? Sign up to BitGet and redeem your $50 in USDT just by following the link in the show notes. My guest today is Brandon Psifour Conley. Brandon is deep into the wonderful world of Bitcoin and more recently, I suppose, Bitcoin Ordinals. So I think we will chat all things Bitcoin, Bitcoin Ordinals, and potentially some Cypherpunk stuff as well. But we'll get to that. Welcome to the show, Mr. Psifour.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for having me on, Andy. And definitely, that's kind of my background. I started out in Bitcoin. Then I went and explored the wide world of Web3, and then I came back to Bitcoin to shake the hornet's nest a little bit with Ordinals.
I love it. All right. And just for the record, you know, your Twitter handle is Psifour, which is spelled Psifour. And I understand that's more the pseudonym that Bitcoiners and Ordinals folk will know you by. Is there a background behind that handle?
Yeah. So as a kid, one of my my dad worked a lot of hours. So one of my earlier memories with him was actually going to a museum that contained a lot of old cryptography assets. He was doing a lot of signals intelligence. So we went to this museum and it kind of stuck with me looking at like old pictures of the Enigma machines, the black boxes, that kind of stuff. So I got into cryptography very early. This is pre-blockchain days. And I eventually was like, I want a name that kind of encapsulates that I dig this stuff. And I came up with this. It is actually phonetically similar to Cypher. And as a cypherpunk, you know, there's a certain amount of meminess to having something that's spelled drastically different, but sounds the same.
It's fascinating, Mr. Psifour, that your father was involved in, well, signals intelligence or you know, however you want to define that. So I can imagine perhaps that will have stirred your early interest in cypherpunk type activities. Maybe we just start there. So I don't know, what can you tell us about your dad's career and how that inspired you?
So it's mostly just the work ethic combined with, he's very much like me in that we take everything we do and we apply it to every other part of our lives. So a lot of the early conversations with him, when the very earliest things I can remember him talking to me about as a kid were like mathematical concepts, you know, how you work through this. I mean, we even had little like, I don't know, I think it's called the picket fence cipher. It's basically a shape that looks like a picket fence when you draw it out. And we did those when I was like very, very young. So it wasn't so much his work directly, which was with the Air Force, but instead it was that it applied to every part of his life. And as a kid who wanted to be involved with their parents, obviously, like most of us do, it was like this thing that I really thought was awesome. So I kind of embraced it as a direction in life.
And so is that presumably that was your entry point into learning about Bitcoin? And look, I've no idea how old you are or kind of what stage in your life you might have been at when, for example, the Bitcoin Whitepaper was published. Of course, famously first published on one of the better known, if there is such a thing, it's still very niche, but one of the better known cryptography mailing lists. Were you around at that time?
So at that point in time, I was currently enlisted with the United States Air Force. And when I heard rumors of this, I followed it. It was a really neat concept and idea. Like many people, I was like, oh, this is really neat, but it's never going to be practical for like daily use. So I kind of ignored it. When I got out of the military, I had some time. I went to university for a couple of years. And during that time, I was like, okay, now I have a moment. I'm not bogged down in, daily activities like I was when I was enlisted. Let's dig into this a little bit. So I ended up doing some mining. We will not say whose hardware was being used or whose electrical, who's picking up the electric tab, but did a little bit of mining back then and then sold, I think, I don't remember if it was early 2012 or mid 2012. It was the year that we had the big run up from like sub-$1 to $12. And I sold right at the start of that year thinking, well, this was fun. This is a really cool tech demo. It demonstrates that this could be practical in the future, but there's no way this is going to catch on. And the one thing I've learned in life is the moment you say there's no way something will catch on, it is guaranteed to. So I sold enough Bitcoin to cover about a half a month's electric bill back then. And I now price that electric bill at the peak of $60K per Bitcoin, well above $1 million.
Yes, yeah, amazing. Wow. So have you stayed a Bitcoiner the whole way through since then, though?
Oh, absolutely not. So when I left Bitcoin I was like, okay, well, this is really cool. It's cryptographically awesome. From a Cypherpunks ideals, it's really awesome. I'm like, it's not going to make sense long term. So I stepped away for a while. By the time I stepped back into the world of Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto, we now had this Web3 concept was the new hotness. And I was like, okay, well, this is really neat. Programmability is something that as a software engineer, I'm a huge fan of, obviously. I'm a little bit biased. And I ended up working on some stuff over on Ethereum, Polygon. I didn't ever do anything with Solana or ADA, but I was actively trading those. Got a little DGen-y for a while, had some fun, explored what one of the greatest side experiments in Bitcoin has been. And I know that that's controversial, but I really do feel like Ethereum is this great experiment in what Bitcoin would have looked like with generalized computing built into it. And now we're seeing parts of that return in a very Bitcoin way with regards to ordinals.
Yeah, that is exactly right. That's a great way of describing it. So, okay, well let's talk ordinals then, and maybe as a way in, just give us a little bit of some background information as to, I suppose, your current activities or your role, if you like to define it that way, in terms of what you're doing with the Ordinals project.
Absolutely. So I jumped into Ordinals very literally, I think, 2nd, 3rd of February. Was in the Discord spending 12 to 18 hours a day onboarding new Bitcoin full nodes, which was amazing to see. Like literally every day I would wake up, come to my computer, and just spend until I went to sleep making more full nodes on Bitcoin, which is something that if you have any sort of education bent in regards to Bitcoin, that's a good feeling right there when you can see that these people are like excited about it. They came in, they don't have a clue what's going on, but they're like, yeah, I'll run a full node. Just teach me how. And it was a very overwhelming experience in some ways, but also very enlightening into that we may have misunderstood how to educate people all this time and how to onboard people. And then from that, I did a little bit of free consulting work with a bunch of companies and projects in the space. You know, when you're excited about something, you want the best engineering that you can have. Sometimes that means telling people when they're doing it wrong, or telling people when they're doing it right, but they could do it, you know, this other way that may be slightly better for Bitcoin long term. And then that eventually led to Luxor made me an offer about about 5 weeks ago. And I am now employed with Luxor working on their Ordinal Hub project, which is their holistic approach to how do we, as a Bitcoin mining company / technology company, take what we know and apply it to this new space, this new ecosystem, in a way that makes it better for both the more traditional Bitcoiner, hard money, and the newer Bitcoiners who say, Bitcoin has kind of always been a data storage layer. And it's great to kind of get to try to reconcile these two drastically different views into a complete picture where we can all be happy and realize that this is our chain, not a chain.
And so when you say Luxor, you're talking about they're like essentially a Bitcoin mining company. They do, various different things across the Bitcoin industry, but it's mainly mining. So why are they so interested in ordinals?
Yeah, so a lot of them, by a lot of them, sorry, let me be very precise with my language. Nick, the CEO of Luxor, was involved even before I was with Inscriptions and Ordinals, and very much got his feet in the water, got to experience it, got to see the practical impacts on both the social aspect, as well as that this is a profitable addition to mining, in that it pushes us to the future that we were going to ride slightly higher as a fee floor. We were going to ride slightly higher in terms of full blocks. This just accelerated that future. So for miners, it's excellent because it lets them start to really game theory out. How does the world look when subsidies go to zero long term? So Luxor has an interest from that side as a mining pool. That's one of the things they offer. In knowing how your business model is going to survive as subsidies continue to have every 4 years is very vital for long-term business purposes.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's that that has always been one of the it's the paradox of Bitcoin, right? Eventually when the block reward does keep dropping by half every 4 years, what is the remaining incentive for miners in that future? And of course, one possible incentive is that there's just simply much more transaction activity, and ordinals are one path to that future, right?
Exactly. And there's a fair number of people involved in this. CB Spears, who also signed with Luxor actually on the same day I did, we're good friends. He has said since the beginning, in fact, he even told Casey, the creator of the Ordinal Theory paper, and then the Ord client that does the inscriptions, told him, I don't think these images are going to catch on, was, I believe, the quote. And that's such a fantastic take, because it goes back to what I said. The moment you say something will never scale, something will never catch on, it's the best way to guarantee it will. And I'm still not 100% convinced that where we're at with ordinals and inscriptions is the future, though. I think that this technology opens up a lot of doors that will then lead us back to the hard money side of Bitcoin, because the hard money side is what the incentive structure is optimized for. I think long-term what this will do is it'll open up new ways to engage with that we had never considered before, in terms of DIDs enabling decentralized identity. Potentially you could create fractionalized Bitcoin, which I personally don't like, but I feel like that might have potential long-term to solve a lot of the the economic problems if Bitcoin's price were to rise to a level that sats were no longer granular enough to conduct transactions. So there's a lot to this. I think it really does change a lot of how we could look at a future of Bitcoin.
And look, I just can't resist asking, what when you say if the price of Bitcoin rises to the kind of price where sats are no longer the easiest way to price a transaction, what kind of price in dollar terms are you talking? That seems large.
Well, so if we imagine a future where Balaji's bet were to come true, right? Was that $1 million of Bitcoin? At that level, a sat is now worth 1 cent.
Yeah.
Okay, we can make this work. We can still do granular transactions in that. The fact that you won't be able to spend less than $3.30 to do a transaction will hurt, because that's literally the dust limit of a Taproot transaction currently.
Right.
That won't be comfortable for the network, but we can make this work. It won't be the end of the world. But let's look further into a future where price starts to decouple from value, because price is kind of an illusionary thing created by the fact that we all live in a fiat world and have to, if we want to, yes. If you want to have a car and food and everything else, most of us don't live in a citadel where we can avoid these attachments to this idea of fiat currency. But eventually there is a either inevitably a decoupling or a reimagining of how we appreciate value. And when the value reaches a point where a sat exceeds what you could buy for a penny, 5-10 years ago, we won't look at current pennies because they're basically useless with modern inflation. Then the question arises, how do we handle that if we don't fractionalize sats further? Is there a point where Bitcoin is not sufficiently granular to conduct the simplest transactions? And we could say, okay, that's because Bitcoin is a settlement layer, is the phrase a couple people have moved towards, right? But that really does feel like a cop-out for what should be, quote unquote, the one true chain. I'm all for side chains. I'm all for meta protocols, obviously, ordinal theory. But I feel like there's a concern there at the very least if we don't think about these things and think about how best to keep the incentive structure aligned long term with hard money concepts while also permitting these really novel experiences and ideas on top of Bitcoin.
Nice. I like it. Thank you for giving us that perspective. I think Psifour, maybe we should just get you to give us kind of your version of, I suppose, a high-level summary of what ordinal theory is, how, what ordinals are, what are inscriptions. Maybe just kind of give us, for the listeners who are listening and they're like, oh man, I kind of get the Bitcoin digital gold hard money thesis, but what are ordinals? It can be easy if people who spend any time on crypto Twitter or certainly Bitcoin Twitter will have seen the debate that goes back and forward and will have their own opinions on ordinals. And I have had Psifour on the podcast before. I've had Jamal from Gamma and Brett from Gamma have been on the show before. But that's the only ordinals content I've done on this podcast, I think. So do you want to just kind of give us your version of the high level summary of what ordinals are all about and the promise and potential of what they bring to Bitcoin?
Absolutely. And Jamil, you couldn't have asked for a better person to bring on. That guy is incredibly smart and has a pretty good view on things, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But ordinal theory is very simple, and it doesn't have any inherent conflicts with Bitcoin, other than that a lot of people never had a reason to look at the way Bitcoin's tech actually works. This has probably been the most saddening part, I guess, for me of dabbling with this new tech, is realizing that a lot of people I really respected for being deeply entrenched in Bitcoin were entrenched, not educated. And what I mean by this, ordinal theory is simple. It's that we all know where sats come from. like there is a Genesis or a Coinbase transaction in every block. It's very simple to see, okay, X sats were produced in this block. Given that, it's simple to say, if we can follow the trail of UTXOs back to that, we can kind of say with some form of certainty, as long as we agree about the method of tracking them back to that origination, that this sat is that sat. Now, obviously, there's some assumptions made in that tracking. Maybe I say that it's the first in, first out on transactions determines which ones get sent where. You say the opposite. Ordinal theory, all it does is just makes that decision. It says publicly, in a way that people can choose to agree or disagree with, that when a transaction happens, the order of the output sats will match the order of the input sats. And as long as you have that core agreement, we can now track a sat from Genesis, like I said, Coinbase transaction, through this process of first in, first out on every transaction it's part of, to its final output that's currently in our UTXO set. That is ordinal theory in probably the most concise package I can imagine for it. And then inscriptions are just arbitrary data storage in witness data, which I actually understand the concerns of some people who believe that Bitcoin wasn't a data storage layer to start with. My counter would be that some of the biggest databases in the world are devoted to financial transactions. So to imagine Bitcoin as not being a database of sorts is ignoring the inherent method of storing data. My argument for inscriptions over alternatives that we've had in the past, I mean, Counterparty's been around for 8 years. Is that correct? So Counterparty is storing things as quote unquote fake multisigs, right? Which is horribly inefficient from a data storage standpoint. Witness data, as of SegWit, we all agreed in, 2016? Let's instead have a place that we store bulk data that we don't need for the actual ledger validation of Bitcoin. Not signatures, but just the pure ledger, money moved here, money moved here. So putting bulk data there honestly makes sense from a design perspective. We could argue that should only be used for signatures, but then the question arises, what is a signature? And if you can't strictly define this in a way that doesn't break multisigs, break potential covenants, there's so many things that rely on being able to have pretty much arbitrary signatures that you won't restrict arbitrary data. To use a very cypherpunk phrase, the signal is the noise. So long as you have signal, you'll have noise. And if you have noise, the inverse is true, where the noise is the signal. And that's all inscriptions are doing, is using this opportunity to store arbitrary data, to store data that people find valuable.
And okay, got it. So thank you for that. And look, this is a bit of a simplistic question, but, what is the difference, Psifour, in terms of, Satoshi, of course, inscribed, the headline from the London Times or whatever it was, Chancellor on the brink of bailing out banks or whatever it was. What is the difference between transcribing that headline and that, the Genesis block Coinbase or whatever it is, compared to what do Ordinals and Transcriptions take a few steps further? And what are the use cases that unlocks?
The primary concern with the difference comes down to that storage could have been op returns, but we had a social or cultural disagreement about this quite a number of years ago at this point. Many people call it the op return wars, where we decided that instead of storing stuff in op return data, we would cap this. I believe the limits, I want to say 83 bytes. I am probably incorrect on that. It might be 80 flat. But the point still stands that we restricted the storage of op return because people wanted to use it in this way. But to restrict it like that on a single piece of software and say that defines what Bitcoin is, in my opinion, seems counterintuitive to what Bitcoin should be. as a cypherpunk. We could disagree on that and say that, well, my ideals are the ones that are wrong. I'd be willing to have that debate with anyone. But the purpose of this is to be a permissionless platform. That people were upset that others wanted to use this database, decentralized database, to store data is counterintuitive. And it starts to feel like a permissioned garden of sorts that's decided upon by, fiat of BIPs editors and Bitcoin Core developers. And I love this because these people have put in thousands of hours of work. They're amazing. There's a reason Bitcoin has become what it is today. It's because of the hard work of lots of people. But I think that socially, we always have to be cautious of the idea that we can create a walled garden. I want people to make things I don't like. As a cypherpunk, this is something you have to come to terms with eventually. If you want permissionlessness, you want cryptography, you want freedom for people, it means that people are going to use the things that you want for them in the ways that you will find the absolute most distasteful, annoying, technically infeasible, and you'll have to sit there and accept that, because anything less than accepting other people's ability to do these things is tantamount to saying, let's just remove permissionlessness. And to be very blunt, Bitcoin without permissionlessness is a useless experiment.
Yep. Could not have said it better. Okay. So look, no argument there. And that kind of that's really at the crux of the debate, if you can censor someone's ability to make a transaction or do something with Bitcoin, then that defeats the purpose of Bitcoin, doesn't it? But I think people still, what's hard for people to understand, Psifour, is the purpose of ordinals or what you can do with them now, and potential other use cases in the future. You mentioned decentralized identity, and the easy way for people to understand ordinals, I guess, is the kind of it's not a perfect comparison, but the Bitcoin version of NFTs on Ethereum or other more other smart contract platforms, shall we say. But there are differences as well, right?
Absolutely. We do not have complete programmability like an Ethereum does. We don't have, any sort of forced KYC like you may have seen on other chains. But what this does is it takes the power from what would have otherwise been shadowy corporations that were doing chainalysis without telling anybody in a lot of cases to analyze, de-anonymize, attack privacy, etc. And it makes the methods they use ubiquitous with the chain itself in a way where people become aware of them. Like, I've been astounded how many people didn't realize that all of their transactions for all of history on Bitcoin are visible. And given any sort of, reasonable computing power, you could probably track most of that down in a very timely manner. So this is probably the cypherpunk in me talking when I say this, but I truly believe that this is one of those cases where, whether he meant to or not, Casey shined a light on a bigger problem that we were going to experience in the next couple of years, where the ease of performing analysis of transactions on chain was going to continue to rise, but the awareness of those of us using the network wasn't going to rise with it. And instead, now we have this moment in time where people are very aware of the ability to analyze and track sats forward and backwards. It's opened up the question of, well, what other methods of tracking these are there? And how do we protect ourselves? And the answer for anybody listening who wants to protect their privacy in a very Bitcoin way, the Bitcoin Whitepaper, I believe section 10 on privacy, says use a different key. Or in the case of, to use the modern lingo, use a different address for everything. There's no downside to it other than computational costs to you. And doing so breaks almost every meaningful form of chainalysis other than the end game, where eventually all of this will get cracked. It's just a matter of computing power. But by then, it'll be non-consequential if all of your stuff can be de-anonymized, hopefully.
Wow, yeah, there's a lot to take in there, Psifour, and as you're talking there, I have open on my computer in front of me because I had it open the whole time we've been talking. It's I haven't read it in a few years, but it's an incredible piece of writing. You'll be familiar with it. It's called a Cypherpunks Manifesto, written by Eric Hughes in 1993. And essentially, it's the cypherpunk rallying cry, a call to arms over the importance of privacy and why privacy is necessary for an open society, a democratic society, if you like, and this is the crucial bit, in the electronic age. And bear in mind that this is 1993, so way before Bitcoin, and really before, certainly way before the modern internet as well. But the early cypherpunks were very aware of what was coming and the threat that was really posed by certainly authoritarian governments, but really any government in the world, any central authority who had control of the electronic networks that were just beginning to govern daily lives in the 1990s. And look at where we are today. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, Psifour, but yeah, it's an incredible piece of writing, and I'll put a link to that manifesto in the show notes, because if you haven't read it, it's powerful stuff, right, Psifour?
Absolutely. Every person involved in the cypherpunk movement of the 90s honestly paved the way for us to still have a free society today, as far as I'm concerned. The ubiquitous nature of access to the internet and all of our data being stored on it, I highly doubt that we would have developed the cryptographically sane standards we did without the efforts of these people. I will say I do deviate from some of the ideals, I think, in that I think that privacy is very vital, but I think cryptography expands beyond that. I think that the way I phrase it is I want applied cryptography in the hands of every person, whether they know it or not. I often say I want your grandma to be able to run a Bitcoin full node and connect her own mobile wallet to it and do this in a cryptographically safe and secure manner. And that aligns with what they said, but my goal isn't that everybody needs to know cryptography at the end of the day, which that was a common push in the 90s. Instead, my goal is just that we, as the people who dabble with this stuff, the people who really dig into these tough topics of cryptography and even just how to present it to the average person, the education side of this, we have a duty both as people and as stewards of technology to make sure that we are building things cryptographically secure to the point where our stuff is safe and secure. My data, I feel like, is relatively secure, but I want everybody else's to be as well. And that goes back to what I said before. The moment you want to make exceptions to that is the moment the entire system falls apart. I want everybody's iPhone to be unhackable. I want everybody's Android phone to be unhackable. Unfortunately, for it to apply to everyone of the quote unquote good guys in the world, it also has to apply to the quote unquote bad guys of the world.
100%. Look, not to dwell on this, but you said, something quite interesting, Psifour, about how, with the relentless exponential advance of, computing power, really, and, we're seeing this be demonstrated in really tangible ways at the moment with, of course, the large language model AI boom. Just what is there something to when do we have to worry, about, I suppose, quantum computers and the like, again, cracking that cryptography? And are these problems that can be defended against down the road?
Sure. There are amazing researchers in the field of cryptography who have already started to propose quantum resistant cryptography methods. When I said that, what I meant is that we will eventually have computers that can crack our current level of cryptography. It's just inevitable. It's the nature of time marching on and technology going with it. The level of security people need is very different. If you are an average user, an HD wallet, a hierarchical deterministic wallet that takes a single private key and generates a bunch of addresses easily for you, that is more than sufficient to keep your privacy safe well beyond the statute of limitations of almost anything that could possibly come up when your government changes the rules on you in a couple of years. With that in mind, if you were a more privacy conscious person, or you were living within an authoritarian regime, or you were involved with anything that would add a risk factor for you, then there might be the need to use individual private keys instead of any sort of deterministic way of creating these from an initial one, because eventually quantum computing will break that, and all of those addresses will be associated with each other. Whereas if you were, say, using legacy addresses and you were generating one each time, that threat that they will eventually be cracked exists. That's just how quantum computing is going to break things, but they're not going to de-anonymize as a result of that.
Got it. Reassuring. Thank you. All right, look, as we start to finish off this part of the podcast, Psifour, maybe just bring it back to ordinals, and I suppose, what's happening with ordinals at the moment, the kind of the market for trading ordinals. Can you give us a sense of kind of the numbers of people that are participating in making inscriptions, new addresses coming into the system, or new accounts on markets such as Gamma and places like that, and kind of, we saw this because of so much ordinals activity. You talked about how this is a potential boon to the Bitcoin miners. Can this activity be sustained, or will we see, that typical crypto kind of boom and bust cycle? Certainly saw that in, Ethereum NFTs, which have really fallen off in the bear market. Look, lots of data points there to consider, but just give us just your sense of what's happening at the moment with ordinals.
Sure. I don't have my dashboards pulled up in front of me. What I can say is, as of the end of March, we conclusively knew that at least 2,000 new full nodes were spun up just by a small handful of people within the Ordinals Discord. This excludes anybody who went and figured it out on their own without any sort of tech support. This excludes any nodes that would have come online outside of this. But we've seen an increase in full nodes. We've seen an increase in fee rate activity. We've seen an increase in at least visibly an increase in the number of active people talking about Bitcoin, engaging with Bitcoin. We can, again, it'll be endlessly discussed if this is good or bad, but I think at the end of the day, we've brought a lot of developers like me back to the chain we wanted to be on, because there's finally fun stuff to play with and build and, hack around and see what we can make that makes the world better. As for if it's sustainable, I think we'll empty the mempool again at least one more time before the next bull rush. But I'm going to be honest, I think that we're going to see from here on out that there is a floor that people are willing to pay for block space. I have tons of data I want to put on Bitcoin, and if the fee rate goes low enough, I will do so. So I think this is kind of what happens. Is I don't think it's that we price out financial transactions most of the time. I mean, that last rush to like 600 sats per fee byte probably did. But I think instead what you're going to see is a lot of times these acting as a backstop, providing a stable price that miners can know that their business is going to continue to operate against. And as time goes on, demand continues to grow for financial transactions. Financial transactions will drive the fee rate above that backstop, and the backstop will follow it. So I think this is the new normal, if you will.
Got it. All right. Thank you for that. I reckon what we'll do, Psifour, is we'll go to a break and then we'll come back. We'll have some fun. We'll run you through the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round. But just before the break, look, tell people where they can go to learn more about the Ordinals Project and, of course, how they can find you on Twitter.
Absolutely. So the Ordinals Project, as created by Casey, is available. The documentation, which is where I recommend starting out, is docs.ordinals.com. As well as there's a GitHub repo for it. It used to be github.com/Casey/ord. I believe it's now been moved to /ordinals/ord. And that is the reference implementation that almost every other piece of software in the ecosystem is built off of. And then if for some reason people like to hear more hot takes like the ones I seem to always have, I am available on Twitter at twitter.com/Psifour. Psifour.
Yes, indeed. All right, well, let's go to the break and then we'll be right back in, well, about 45 seconds to really test Psifour's hot take ability. Going to be fun. We'll be back in 1 second.
Look, we'd all like to say we're pro traders, but the reality is we're probably not. But with BitGet, you don't have to be. Why? Because BitGet is the world's largest copy trading exchange. Instead of you muddling through it on your own, feel confident. BitGet allows you to automatically copy trade from over 80,000 elite traders with 24/7 support on our secure copy trading platform. Start following expert traders on bitget.com. Check for details in the show notes and join BitGet today.
All right, we are back and I'm with Brandon, Psifour, Conley, Bitcoiner, Cypherpunk, Ordinals Project person. Psifour, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Absolutely, as long as everybody promises to be nice about it afterwards, because I do have typically some spicier takes. They are not meant to be mean to anybody, though. In fact, for any of the listeners that were here earlier, my comments about Bitcoin Core and the BIPs repo, please understand these are based entirely out of my love for Bitcoin and honestly, even a love for the people involved with both of those repos.
I love it. All right, I'm just going to run some questions at you, Psifour. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Just, give us your honest thoughts. Question 1 for you is, where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I would say that I used to be strictly a multi-coiner. Now I am back to being a Bitcoiner now that I can do the things I want here in a way that makes sense, in my opinion, is Bitcoin aligned in terms of ethos. But I'm also open to the idea that if other people feel like another chain meets their needs, we've said for a long time in Bitcoin this idea of, Ethereum was a test net. Cardano can be a test net. If we understand this idea that they can go do the best thing they can do, and we can learn from that and make Bitcoin better, I don't think there's any flaw with that idea.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Psifour, what would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
That we are horrifically underprepared for the at least one hard fork that we should have in the next probably 12 years. Specifically, I believe we have 2. I think we have at least 2 hard forks that we have to make within the next 12 years. One of them is in regards to quantum computing, as we discussed earlier. I think that being at least ready with a hard fork in terms of an algo switch to something that's quantum resistant is important. Furthermore, with state actors becoming more of a concern, I think being prepared with an algo switch undermines the ability of said actors to enter the ecosystem. This has been a defense mechanism that's been widely documented in the past by people who have played out the game theory of how to defend against such an attack. And then, more importantly, a signed 32-bit integer will no longer be able to represent a timestamp properly in 2036, I believe. Might be a different year, but it's within that very tight frame. And what I mean by this is Bitcoin is not directly susceptible. We use unsigned integers. We can go for twice the length of time since 1970. But this assumes that every compiler will compile to a unsigned integer as you expect. This assumes that everything will work properly. There is no reason to take that risk. And instead, it makes more sense to do a hard fork, handle this now, and be good until the next time we run into this with 64 or 128-bit timestamps.
I love it. All right. Bill Gates famously said, Psifour, that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So look, with that in mind, anything you like here, Bitcoin, blockchain, Web3, what does it look like in 10 years' time?
I think that that's hopeful, but I would like to believe that we'll have decoupled from the idea of price and understand that Bitcoin has value beyond its measurement in fiat, as well as the tech itself has fundamental value that should exist and should be praised, placed on a pedestal almost of this technology that will allow us to change the way we can approach a lot of problems in our world. It seems rather trivial because we always look at it and we say, Bitcoin's money, but Bitcoin's so much more than that. It's the opportunity to decentralize every part of our tech stack if we're willing to use it in that way.
Very nicely said.
And that's what I'm hoping we can accomplish in 10 years. Very
nicely said. Okay, the flip side of that 10-year time frame, of course, is now best expressed by a quote by sci-fi author William Gibson, who said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, Psifour, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
The future's always been here. Everything we're doing right now in Bitcoin has existed since 2012 for most of it, 2016 for the parts that rely on SegWit. So the future's always been here. It's just that we weren't brave enough to step into it.
I like it. Very well said. Okay. What keeps you up at night?
Oh man. I have deep concerns about the lack of preparedness in regards to the tech issues I've already raised. I have deep concerns about our social readiness to handle issues that arise. Notice we had a fracturing of the community over something as trivial as learning to count that sats could be counted. Like, we all learned to count when we were children, but for some reason, this is a new concept that's worth literally fracturing our community in half. So I don't think we're ready socially. I don't think we're ready technologically for any sort of real pressure. We're at both the greatest moment in Bitcoin's entire history and potentially the most dangerous simultaneously. And then you couple this with, AI is not going to take over the world today, tomorrow, but I've already seen it bypass the majority of the junior devs that I've worked with in terms of its capabilities. It's like having AI working with me is like having 2 additional junior devs. I see a future where AI becomes a serious concern to almost every meaningful aspect of this. And even more so if we enable it to start producing hardware that could potentially accelerate the deprecation of certain cryptographic primitives.
Nice. You're you have a military background a little bit, Psifour. Are you familiar with the thesis by Jason Lowry, Soft War, a novel theory on power projection and the national strategic significance of Bitcoin? Psifour, you're on mute.
I literally muted into the question that time. So despite speaking very seriously for the last hour, like I am a very serious person, I have not read Soft War, not because I don't want to, but because I jokingly made the comment once that he'd have to send me a copy for me to read it. And he has never done so. I'm not on his radar, so why would he? So now it's more just me being childish and refusing to buy a copy.
Yeah, fair enough. I haven't read it either. Weirdly, I know he blocked a lot of people for some reason. It kind of had some controversy there. And yeah, strangely, I'm blocked by him on Twitter. But I've never mentioned him, never tweeted at him. I guess I'm on a block list that he's used or something. Bit strange, but anyway.
I mean, did you buy his book?
No.
See? No wonder you're blocked. You deserved it.
All right, let's start to finish this off, Psifour. Let's get weird just here at the end. Let's zoom out. What do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
Neither. I think we can continue to wallow in whatever our problems of each generation are while slowly improving towards a utopian ideal. I think we eventually become a multi-planetary species and get to deal with the challenges that arise for Bitcoin as a result of that. For anybody who's not up to date on this, Bitcoin breaks terribly when you try to scale it to an interplanetary scale. But yeah, I don't think it ends in all bad, and I don't think it ends in all good. I mean, there is the risk of both at all times, but I like to have faith that people will find a way to avoid the absolute worst case scenario without also finding the best case scenario.
Very pragmatically said. Hard to argue with that. All right, finally, Psifour, the last question. What is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show?
Man, there's so many excellent ones. Right now, because I wasn't ready for the question, I'm going to probably say Firefly. I don't know if that's truly my favorite, but it is a good choice.
Yeah. My partner, she loves Firefly. Yeah.
There's just something about the space cowboyism of it, right? Like, there's no way not to love the idea of jumping all over the galaxy and doing all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah, and look, Joss Whedon, creator of Firefly Yemen, he's done some cool stuff. Also, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Hey, can't argue with that.
Exactly, a true classic.
All right, this has been fun, Psifour. I have very much enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Nothing else to say really, except again, take it out and tell people where they can find you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. Anybody who wants to deal with any more of my hot takes or come complain to me directly can find me on Twitter under the name Psifour, Psifour.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Psifour. All the best and bye for now. All right. Well, there you go, Psifour. Talking all things ordinals. And look, Cypherpunk, Cypherpunk, Cypherpunk stuff. I mentioned the Cypherpunks Manifesto. Man, it's one of my favorite pieces of writing, just because it's as I said, it's a call to arms. Let me just read a couple of sentences because it's good stuff. It says, privacy is necessary for an open society in the electronic age. Privacy is not secrecy. A private matter is something one doesn't want the whole world to know, but a secret matter is something one doesn't want anybody to know. Privacy is the power to selectively reveal oneself to the world. Yeah, really good stuff. And then what else? It says, we cannot expect governments, corporations, or other large faceless organizations to grant us privacy out of their benevolence. It is to their advantage to speak of us, and we should expect that they will speak. To try to prevent their speech is to try to fight against the realities of information. Information does not just want to be free, it longs to be free. Information expands to fill the available storage space. Information is rumor's younger, stronger cousin. Information is fleeter of foot, has more eyes, knows more, and understands less than rumor. Wow, really interesting, isn't it? For privacy to be widespread, It must be part of a social contract. People must come together and together deploy these systems for the common good. Privacy only extends so far as the cooperation of one's fellows in society. We, the Cypherpunks, seek your questions and your concerns and hope we may engage you so that we do not deceive ourselves. We will not, however, be moved off our course. The Cypherpunks are actively engaged in making the networks safer for privacy. Let us proceed together apace. Onward. Excellent. Great stuff. Again, written by Eric Hughes back in 1993. All right. Well, shout out to Psifour. Thank you for coming on the show. Shout out to Brett for Gamma for connecting me with Psifour. And shout out to Eric Hughes, one of the original early 90s Cypherpunks. Shout out also, of course, to Jason Lowry for blocking me on Twitter for no reason, but especially to Joss Whedon, the creator of Firefly, but more importantly, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you for listening, team. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin. Please make sure you're subscribed to the podcast and whatever podcast app you are using so you know when each new episode drops. But that is it for today. See ya.